Welcome to WorldWire. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In early 2025, the balance of power in American government faced its greatest test in decades. The nation watched with bated breath as the three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, were thrust into a high-stakes confrontation that would shape the future of American democracy. A fierce conflict erupted between President Trump's Department of Justice and the federal judiciary over the administration's aggressive deportation policy. Tensions ran high as the DOJ pushed forward, determined to enforce sweeping new measures, while federal judges pushed back, citing constitutional limits and the rule of law. The administration invoked the rarely used Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to justify the mass removal of alleged Trinidad gang members to El Salvador, bypassing standard legal protections. This unprecedented move sidestepped established immigration courts and due process, raising alarms among legal scholars and advocates alike. Civil liberties groups decried the move as a violation of due process, setting the stage for a constitutional showdown. Across the country, protests erupted outside courthouses, and legal organizations mobilized to challenge the administration's actions in court, arguing that fundamental rights were at stake. The courts quickly became the battleground, as judges issued orders to halt the deportations and demanded government compliance. Legal battles unfolded in rapid succession, with emergency hearings and late-night rulings dominating the headlines. The executive branch's response raised urgent questions. What happens when the government ignores a court order? Who holds power in a crisis? The White House, under intense scrutiny, refused to back down, escalating the standoff and deepening the national divide. The coming months would test the very foundation of American democracy, as the nation braced for a historic struggle over the limits of executive power and the enduring strength of the Constitution. The crisis reached a boiling point in March 2025, sending shockwaves through the nation and dominating headlines across every major network. As the administration moved forward with plans to deport hundreds of individuals, it did so in direct opposition to a federal judge's urgent order to halt all flights immediately. Judge James Boasberg, presiding over the case, issued a clear and unequivocal command: stop the deportations at once and return any planes already in the air to U.S. soil without delay. Despite this, flights continued to depart, openly defying the court's authority and leaving the legal community stunned by the administration's audacity. Government lawyers, fully aware of the judge's order, found themselves caught between their legal obligations and the executive branch's determination to press on, transforming a legal standoff into a full-blown constitutional crisis. The deportees, many of whom had never faced trial, were delivered to El Salvador's notorious CCOT prison under a controversial U.S.-funded agreement, raising international human rights concerns. Back in the United States, the focus shifted dramatically. How could the executive branch so brazenly defy a federal court's direct order, and what would the consequences be? The administration's actions ignited a firestorm of protest and debate, raising the specter of contempt charges and fueling fears of a breakdown in the rule of law at the highest levels of government. The fate of the deportees, and the very credibility of the federal courts, now hung precariously in the balance, as families and advocates watched anxiously. Across the country, the nation watched in suspense as the boundaries of executive power were tested as never before, and the future of American democracy seemed to teeter on the edge. In the aftermath, the question was clear: who gave the order to defy the court? Months later, the administration revealed that Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem made the final call, despite being briefed on Judge Boasberg's order. DOJ lawyers argued the order didn't apply to planes already airborne, a claim met with deep skepticism. Deputy Assistant Attorney General Drew Ensign, who relayed the order, denied knowing the flights continued, raising doubts about internal communication and truthfulness. Plaintiffs' lawyers sought to question Ensign and others under oath, suspecting a deliberate strategy to circumvent the court. The administration's defense painted a picture of calculated risk, betting their legal interpretation would hold. With Noem named, the fight became a high-stakes battle over accountability at the highest levels. The official story unraveled when whistleblower Erez Ruvini, a former DOJ attorney, alleged a culture of defying court orders, encouraged by senior leadership. He accused Emil Bove, now a federal judge, of fostering this environment. Claims Bove denied, but internal documents suggested a pattern of circumventing judicial oversight. Judge Boasberg responded by initiating rare criminal contempt proceedings, determined to hold officials accountable for ignoring his order. The plaintiffs named at least 9 current and former Trump officials to testify, including Noam, Bove, and Ensign. The stakes soared. Senior officials now faced possible fines or imprisonment for contempt. The judiciary asserted its power, refusing to let the matter drop. The case was no longer just about deportations, it was about defending the integrity of the courts. The stage was set for a dramatic reckoning in open court. The Supreme Court soon weighed in, issuing a ruling that while voiding Judge Boasberg's specific order, firmly upheld the principle of due process for all in U.S. custody. The decision sent a powerful signal that, even in times of national anxiety, the Constitution's protections must not be cast aside. The court's opinion emphasized that the government's power is not absolute, and that every individual, regardless of status, deserves a fair hearing before the law. The justices rejected the administration's attempt to bypass the courts using the Alien Enemies Act, delivering a clear rebuke. Their decision was a reminder that the executive branch cannot act unilaterally when fundamental rights are at stake. The government could not simply declare people enemies and deport them without hearings. The ruling reinforced the idea that due process is not a privilege, but a right guaranteed to all, even in the most challenging circumstances. In a related case, the Supreme Court ordered the return of deportee Kilmar Abrego Garcia, demanding the U.S. retrieve him from El Salvador. This extraordinary move underscored the seriousness with which the court viewed violations of judicial authority. The administration claimed it was powerless, while El Salvador refused to release the men, creating a diplomatic standoff. Tensions mounted as both governments stood firm, and the fate of the deportees hung in the balance. The impasse was resolved months later through a complex prisoner swap involving Venezuela. Behind the scenes, diplomats negotiated intensely, seeking a solution that would satisfy all parties and restore a fragile sense of order. The episode exposed the chaos and far-reaching consequences of defying a court order. It revealed how quickly legal and diplomatic systems can be thrown into turmoil when the rule of law is ignored. The Supreme Court's intervention underscored the limits and necessity of judicial oversight. Without the courts, the balance of power can tip dangerously, threatening the very foundation of democracy. The administration's actions had triggered an international crisis and a fundamental test of the rule of law. The world watched as the U.S. grappled with its own principles and the consequences of its decisions. The message was clear: constitutional rights cannot be set aside for expediency. In the end, the episode served as a stark reminder that justice, though sometimes slow and complicated, remains the bedrock of American democracy. The fallout rocked the Department of Justice, especially the Office of the Solicitor General, long known for its independence and legal excellence. By late 2025, over half its frontline attorneys had resigned, citing discomfort with the department's new direction. The appointment of D. John Sauer, Trump's former personal attorney, as Solicitor General broke with tradition and deepened concerns about politicization. New hires leaned heavily Republican, eroding the office's bipartisan reputation. Critics warned the OSG was becoming the president's lawyer, not the government's. The mass departures threatened the office's credibility before the Supreme Court. The crisis over the deportations had triggered a crisis of identity within the DOJ itself. The department's future, and its commitment to the rule of law, was now in question. The 2029 good setting, onadan stive an dan sta. Survive showdown between the Trump administration and the judiciary was a defining moment for American law. At stake was the rule of law, the idea that even the government must obey the courts. When officials defy court orders, public trust erodes and democracy is put at risk. The legal system's response, from contempt proceedings to Supreme Court rulings, showed the resilience of the judiciary, but also its limits. The saga exposed the dangers of politicizing the DOJ and the fragility of democratic norms. The legacy of the deportation crisis is a stark warning. The rule of law depends on the willingness of leaders to respect it. The questions raised in 2025 will shape America's legal and political future for years to come.